I'm Pearl, and today I am gonna bite the bullet and talk about periods. And the reason I thought, this is the time to do this, I was actually doing some meditation this morning, and I just had such a strong feeling that this is what I should be talking about. And there's been so much going on, and I've been really aware of it the last couple of days, and really the last couple of years as well. Before that, it really wasn't on my radar about what we could call gender ideology. And what I really want to say about that, because it has been challenging me, and I've been, I have been kept awake nights thinking about certain things, is I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know because there's so much that we don't know. There's so much research that hasn't been done. And recently I was looking into the review of the Tavistock unit that deals with gender and gender dysphoria, things like that. And one of the big things that came out of that review was that the records had not been kept well enough for us to really know, for there to be anyone to be able to draw really clear answers from what is effectively at the moment still clinical research. So I found that very interesting, and there's a lot there. I haven't read the review because I think that's a lot. And the most important thing is that I don't know. I don't know. And we're dealing with something that's very new, in a lot of ways, a lot of questions about things that are very new, and a lot of other different overlapping issues as well. And the other thing I thought about was it really, this conversation, I say conversation, it's really like a screaming match that's going on at the moment. And it's very important, I think, when we're discussing anything, that we can talk about things, we can ask questions, we can have an open, honest conversation. We can talk about the things that we're scared of, the things that bother us, and why they bother us. And it really put me in mind of, over the last nearly 7 years now in England, we've been arguing about Brexit. And people label themselves one thing and something else, and we go on about it. But really, with Brexit, we didn't know what we were arguing about. If we look back at what was being said at the beginning, and I don't know if we've even figured it out yet with Northern Ireland. So 6-7 years later, we still don't know what Brexit actually means. And yet these huge arguments and families falling out, people getting losing their friendships, everything, because we're arguing about something. But we don't know what it really is, because it hasn't actually been figured out yet. And I think that's where we are with this, really, is that there are so many questions, and some of the people who are speaking now and making a lot of common sense are people who are transgender themselves. And very often it's those people who have that lived experience who are going to be able to talk about things in a really sensible way, in an honest way, in an open way. And the thing that really bothers me, and I don't want to get into the problem is this and that, because we're going to talk about periods, and that's what this is all about. I want to talk about periods. But this is the main thing, and I would say does relate to all of this, because I said in a little short I did before that periods can kind of be like a taboo, and we have that history, and so sometimes when we want to ask questions and we get shut down, it's like, oh no, you can't talk about that. No, you can't talk about that. And that's a sort of taboo that we I was brought up in a way of, we don't really talk about these things, or, really, we don't talk about these things. But when we get shut down and we get told that we can't ask questions and we can't challenge and we can't disagree, that is the mentality of a cult. And when I went off and I was doing my spiritual exploration and going around the world and doing all that, I have a very good friend, and she always said to me, well, Pearl, she said, if you do end up in a cult, I will come and rescue you. I will come rescue you. But when in spirituality, in retreat centers, religion, things like that, we have this thing that pops up, and that is like a cult mentality, where we cannot question, and we are shut down if we ask awkward questions. And that's not what real spirituality is. That's not what, when I've gone out and I've gone and worked with different spiritual teachers, they want the questions. They invite the questions. They are ready for people to disagree with them. They're ready for all kinds of thought and ideas. And I remember, I love the Book of Joy with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, where they have this incredible conversation. And if you want to know what great spiritual conversations where we have differing opinions look like, that is a great way of understanding it, okay? We can sit down and we can say, well, look, I think this and you think that. Okay, let's work it out. It's a little bit like agreeing to disagree, but more than that, it's really about saying we need to understand each other. We need to work together, whether it's a compromise or something. We need to figure it out. We need to be able to get along together. And for that to happen, we need to have good conversations, not all this posturing, not grandstanding. And, I saw a few clips on stuff, and it was about, political leaders talking about what a woman is. And I thought, you know what? I really felt, you don't have any lived experience, guys. You don't. We got men arguing about what women are again, and it pisses me off. Excuse my French. So here's my experience. I'm 51 years old, which means for about 40 years I've been having periods. If you add that up, you get slightly more than 12 in a year, because it's normally a 28-day cycle. I've had about 500 periods in my life. Okay, 500, that's a lot. I added it up, it's something like, we say if you have 10,000 hours of doing something, you're an expert. And I've probably got about 60,000 hours of being on a period. It's a long time. So I wanted to share some of my experience, some of my wisdom from that with you, whether you are somebody who has periods. I'm also going to talk a bit about menopause. Also how you handle periods when you're active, when you're being sporty. Actually, that was one thing I wanted to mention as well. Talk about that. But also if you're a guy, or if you're somebody who doesn't have periods and you want to know a little bit more about it, because you want to be supportive to the women in your life who do have periods. Why not? Why not? And the problem that we have, the problem is, no, one of the conversations that's been happening is we've been talking about trans athletes. And there's been all this talk about testosterone. And we look at testosterone because, unfortunately, the world of sport is institutionally sexist. And the world of medicine is institutionally sexist. And I'm not just saying that, it's very, very easy to figure that out. Which means that menstrual health, and menstrual medicine has often taken a back seat. And it's so important. And with athletics, sport, we talk about, bone density, things like that, all this kind of stuff. Different shape of our bodies. But there is almost no research on how periods affect sport and our fitness and the way that women work at elite levels in sport. There's almost no research. I think there's just starting to be some research now, because we've been sidetracked by the question of testosterone. What about all the other hormones? What about all the other things that go on during a period? So when we're talking about competitiveness at an elite level, and if it's fair, how can you have people who are having periods competing against people who aren't having periods? And I don't mean necessarily like at the same time, because it'd be a lot if we all had them at the same time, but about dealing with that whole cycle of the change in hormones and, how it affects us. And sometimes it affects us more halfway through the cycle, if you like. Anyway, like I said, I wanted to share some stuff with you. And a lot of this stuff I've really discovered in the last few years because of going through the perimenopause. And for those of you who don't know, this is what happens. And most women don't know this. Most people in the world don't know this because then, you know. So when we go through puberty, women's hormones go like this. Up, 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 up. And then they kind of stay about the same. And then what happens when we get to perimenopause? Now we think, you know, the idea is, and you'll see graphs and charts, even in the medical world, right, that will show you that they do this. Da, 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 da. That is not true. Because I watched a lecture with a really, really top doctor, female doctor. And she explained that actually what happens is your hormones, when you get to menopause, perimenopause, your hormones do this for women, right? Ready? So it goes down, but like a roller coaster goes down. So going through perimenopause and menopause is like going through puberty 50 times. It's a heck of a lot. Mine's been particularly difficult, I will say, because I also suffer from migraines. And I get menstrual migraines with aura, which means instead of getting a migraine when I start my period, I get it about 10 days in. So when the estrogen goes back up again. Good. Fun, fun, fun. So it does affect us in lots of ways, this old period business. But of course, the biggest way for most of us is when we're on our period and the bleeding and unfortunately sometimes the leaking and sometimes the pain as well. I'll talk about that too. And I remember my very first period. Might need a drink for this one. So I had been waiting for my period to come in, and I think sometimes we tend to fall into one of two camps. One is like, everyone else is getting them and I want mine because I want to get it over and done with. Or, oh, let's just wait. I don't want it. I'm scared. So we often fall into one of those two camps. And sometimes a little bit in between. And I say I did a very stupid thing before I had my first period. And it wasn't kind of really my choice. Something happened, and it was this. I went over to a friend's house. Don't tell my mum this, okay? And we watched a film. And it's the kind of film my mum would never let me watch, okay? And it was an old movie called Carrie. It's a Stephen King film. And for those of you who know the film, there's a really disturbing scene when Carrie gets her first period. Not the best thing to watch if you've never had a period. So don't do it. Do not do that. Do not do that. And in fairness, my mum wouldn't let me watch that film now. If she found out I watched it now, I'd be in trouble. I know. So anyway, when I had my first period, we were on holiday and we were down by the beach, staying with my grandma. And kudos to my older sister for coming in and being fantastic at the time. But it was a bit of a nightmare because I didn't know what I was doing. It was all, you know, I leaked everywhere. I got it on the bedclothes. And of course, it was like camp bed and all that. And it was just so much drama, you know, that it wouldn't have been if we were at home, probably. And one of the worst things was we were on the beach and I'm sitting there and I love being in the sea. And all I could do was sit on the beach. And then my brothers are going, why aren't you coming in the sea? Why aren't you coming in the sea? And I'm like, not fun. It was just not fun. And I get these really fun, well, I used to get, you know what? I'm actually at that stage where I don't know if I'm ever going to have another period, right? It's quite exciting. It's a bit like that thing, you know, when you're waiting for your first one. Have I had my last one? I really hope so. I really hope so. I just don't know. It's all a bit erratic at the moment. Anyway, so there I was, and I had my very first period. And yeah, it was a mess. It was just, you know, it was so annoying. And it really messed up the holiday. And I have, over the years, I've realised, you know, I have a pattern which happens for me when I have a period, which is I have a very heavy couple of days and then it stops. and then it starts again, and it's like a normal period for another couple of days. And but I had heard that when you got your first period, sometimes they weren't like, they didn't last very long, or you know, you when you got like a little butt, you know, it might not be smaller or bigger than average, you know, like pretty much like menopause. Anyway, so of course I thought, great, it stopped after the first couple of days. It stopped, and put my swimming costume on and went down to the beach and was all ready to jump in the water and have a good time. And then we went over to some friend's house, my mum's friends, and of course what happened was my period came back in again, and I leaked, and I had blood all over my skirt, and I had to go and sit in the car, you know, on a towel while everybody else was having fun. I just sit there in the car looking miserable. And yeah, so it really wasn't very much fun at all. And I think, you know, one of the things that happened because of that is I've always been really paranoid about leaking, and it's very, very difficult. And I always feel for like the tennis players at Wimbledon when they have to play in whites. And I think a lot of them said, you know, can we not play in whites, please? Because imagine when you're on your period trying to play at that level tennis match and not leak, or worrying about leaking. It's just a nightmare. Anyway, so I've been around the world, had a lot of experiences, and yeah, sometimes, I mean, I remember I went to, when I had like a month-long holiday, and I flew out to Mexico, and then spent a lot of time in Florida, and I managed that time, it was a long holiday, I managed to have my period going out, and then my other period coming back, you know, like the heaviest day as well. So I learned that Virgin Airlines in the premium economy have a lot of sanitary protection in the bathroom, which is really good. And it's always a lovely thing, I think, when you go somewhere and they have, you know, in the bathroom they have things for you. It's so nice, it's so lovely, really, really helpful. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, sometimes I've been like on planes. I remember in China, being on a plane in China and coming into Beijing and just thinking, you know, that my body couldn't take much more. Really, really tough. And finding out that in Beijing they don't sell tampons. So that was an eye-opener. And it's difficult when you travel. You never know in countries you go to what kind of sanitary protection they're going to have. Might be a little, might be a lot, might be nothing. So it's tough when you travel to like make sure you pack things and go with that. Anyway, I thought I'd share a few really great things. And this is a brand that I discovered, really good. They're called Waka. Wake up and kick ass. And this is swimming pants, your bikini, what do you call it, bikini briefs? I don't know, are those men's things or women's things? Anyway, these are really great because they are a period thing. So you can go swimming when you've got your period and it all gets soaked up in the pants. And then you just wash them out. So of course that's really ecologically friendly as well. And these have been absolutely brilliant for me for the last couple of years with the, again, when you have your menopause, you get very erratic periods and very heavy as well. So I can wear these when I'm not quite sure what's happening or with a tampon as well. And what I love about these is a lot of times I'm not brave enough to wear them. These are a couple of other things that they make, which I bought, really good. So this is just a normal pant, yeah. And this has got sanitary protection like here, as you'd expect it, but also it goes, so that's the protection part, which is absorbent and soaks up your blood, you know, anything you, period blood, fun, yeah, soaks up the blood. So it goes from the front here, quite high, quite high up, and it goes all the way to the very, very back. So it basically goes up to the waistband. So all the protection is all in the back, which is fantastic for when you're asleep and sometimes you leak all the way back up there. So I love those. I am not usually brave enough to wear these without any other sanitary protection. But what I do is with these, I wear so much less. So if I'm not sure, I can wear them on their own. Or if I've got a really heavy period, I can go lighter. I can wear a lighter thing because I'm not worrying about leaking. So those are really good. But these are my favourite. And this is, these are great. I think these have got like the highest rating ever when they brought these out. They're so good. The only thing with Waka, and I think they're doing a lot better now, is they didn't have larger sizes before, but now they are bringing larger sizes in more of their things. These are your period boxer shorts. These are phenomenal. They're so good. And what I love about these is if you already have periods, you know this. So sometimes it's really hard to sleep, and that's because you're worrying about leaking, or you know, your tampon. You know, everything's shifting around. If you're wearing a tampon, you often have to get up and change it in the night, and it's really hard to get a good night's sleep sometimes when you've got your period. Now these, I'll just show you. I don't know what it is. I mean, partly it's the safety of them, security of them, but I think what it is also because they're longer. If you're wearing anything else, if you're wearing like a pad with that, it stays in place. So in the night, if you're moving around and you're rolling around, all this kind of thing, what's great is it really stays in place. And I get the best sleep when I'm wearing, I love these are the best thing to sleep in, you know, because they don't ride up your bum or anything like that. And so you've got the protection here, goes again right from the front, all the way up to the very, very back. You know, so that's absorbent, and so it will absorb any period blood, anything like that. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Really, really good. And honestly, I'm so glad I discovered those before I hit the worst periods of my menopause, my perimenopause, because I don't know how I would have got through it without them. They're really, really fantastic. I put my thumbs up, hats off to Waka. And also, if you check them out, they do some really, really good stuff in terms of supporting women who can't afford sanitary protection, period poverty, all that kind of stuff. It's really, really good. And my goodness, I wish I had these when I was traveling. My goodness, they would have been so awesome. I mean, the only thing about these, I'll tell you what, the negative thing about these, they are so good, but they take quite a long time to dry. So maybe they wouldn't have been so great when I was traveling because I had to wash and dry things as I was traveling. But I think they probably would have been quite awesome, really, really great stuff. I mean, those are great, really. Those are quite heavy duty. They're the heaviest duty. But these are great because, you know, when you go swimming and you're like, am I not? Dare I? If you've got really heavy periods, you're like, is it gonna be all right? Is it all right? So, you know, if you wear a tampon and you have that, I mean, you know what? It's not just being able to do stuff; it's being able to feel comfortable while you're doing it, isn't it? So those are really, really, really good. They are a bit expensive. I find them quite expensive, but they often have offers. There are other. No, this is becoming a really common thing now. A lot of the other brands are bringing out different kinds of reusable sanitary protection, and honestly, about time, you know. It's funny actually because I suppose way back, you know, we had like rags that people used for sanitary protection, and then they would be washed and reused. So I guess really, you know, we're kind of doing a similar thing, but in a more modern, high-tech way, which is wonderful, really wonderful. Anyway, I wanted to share a couple of other things with you. Again, these are things that I've only discovered fairly recently. And this is the brand, I think this is pretty good, yeah. And this is called, they're called Natracare. So I'm not getting paid by anybody for this, and what I like about this is it's, you know, it's cotton and it's also not plastic. So it's not, you know, not something that's going to fill it landfill. And they also do the tampons and the big ones as well. And I've been using those recently and I found them very, very good. I like these ones because sometimes I don't know what's happening. So they're very small, but they're just panty liners, but they're very useful, I find, for the days when you're like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? I don't know what's going on. And they're very, very useful. And living down by the beach and also traveling, so many times I go out and I find, like, you know, plastic tampon applicators on the beach, which is really horrible. And even the ones that I thought were good, that were like paper, have actually often got plastic on them as well. Oh, so I had to learn about that. That's not good. Anyway, a couple more things. Period pain. Don't knock the hot water bottle. Very, very good, very, very helpful. Tricky when you're perimenopausal or menopausal, because obviously they don't help if you've got hot flashes at the same time as period pain. An interesting thing I have just recently discovered about the perimenopause and menopause is that you get period pain without the period. So if you're not having periods, your body's still trying to figure out what's going on. Still a lot going on down here. Not that much fun. Ibuprofen. Now, it's really good, but you have to be careful with it, because it can, for me, I did it the other day, I took some and it really hurt my stomach. But it can be very, very good if you suffer from migraines. I did another little video about this, because sometimes when you experience period pain, it can cause migraine. And the reason for that is another hormone that we don't really talk about and learn about, which is, or hormones, which is prostaglandins. And when I learned about prostaglandins the last year, while I was researching migraine, I thought, wow, this is what happens, is that when the body is injured, we get prostaglandins. So we often get them when we've got heavy periods as well. And they affect us in all kinds of ways. And this is a little bit like what I was talking about before about the research not being done about periods, you know, for elite athletes, for elite female athletes. Because what if we're experiencing high concentrations of prostaglandins? You know, because it actually, you know, it's just things we don't know about. And as a fitness instructor, I mean, gosh, I mean, I taught a lot of classes when I had a really heavy period. And I remember thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I was worried about leaking, but, you know, obviously I was wearing black trousers, you know, being a bit careful. Let me wear my black trousers. Riding on a lot of adrenaline to get that, you know, to get through the period and get through the class. But I always remember, like, what I would know as I would teach the class was, I'm really going to pay for this later. You know, I'm really going to pay, you know, I can get through the class, but I know this is going to take a lot out of me. But look, talking about periods, you know, there's a lot here, and I don't want to say this in a way like if you're worried or stressed about periods, you know, to say, oh, they're awful and you just got to deal with it, because it's kind of what we've been telling ourselves for years and years and years. And one of the things I would say is it's so important, and you know, I'm really looking at this from having to take them so seriously during menopause and perimenopause, right? Because all the time before, I just got on with it, you know, and I think that's kind of what we kind of get taught to do, which is just to shut up and get on with it. You know, don't take time off school or work if you've got a bad period. You just muscle through and you get through it. And I guess that was my attitude. You know, I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm just going to keep going through, which I have done. But now at this time in my life, I've had to really take them seriously, because they have taken a lot more out of me because of the migraine situation. And I think that's true for a lot of people when we get to this sort of age. You know, things that you kind of managed up to this point, you have to sort of take a little bit more seriously. And as challenging as it's been, I'm glad I've learned more about my body, and I've learned more about periods, and I've learned more about migraine, you know. And I really hope, you know, if you've got questions, put them here, because if I'd known this, I mean, if I'd known this when I was a teenager, my life would be it would have been so much easier. The other thing to remember is ginger is also a great natural anti-inflammatory. So ginger is a really great thing to take when you've got period pain and periods. So stem ginger cookies, ginger ale, ginger ice cream, you know, have some of that. Excuse me. Ginger cake, whatever you like, you know, have a little bit of that. But really, the most important thing I've learned is to cut myself some slack. You know, to not always think that I have to muscle through, that I have to push through, and to kind of go with that natural rhythm. And there's something so magical about periods, you know. I was sitting in the kitchen the other day with my a friend of mine and her daughter and her husband, and she's, you know, hopefully through this. But we were talking about periods and pregnancy and menopause. You know, we were talking about all this stuff, and her husband was there, and we were going, oh, this is crazy. You know, it's a nightmare, and we have to put up with all this stuff, and you know, all the things we have to deal with, and all this. And he said, yeah, it's a nightmare. You know, it's a nightmare. And he was very supportive, you know, to his daughter and his wife and everything. But I said to him, I said, yeah, but if we didn't go through this, you wouldn't have any kids, you know? And he was like, yeah, you're right. And there wouldn't be any children if we didn't go through periods. There wouldn't be. Think about that. I mean, it sounds so obvious when we say it, but it's like a lot of this stuff, it's so obvious. And it's so important to take that time to honour ourselves, you know, honour this beautiful thing that happens. And I don't have kids. I say this, you know, I've had all these periods, but, you know, no kids. But I've had the choice and I've had the opportunity. And to be part of this really magical thing that happens, this, you know, when we're in tune with the moon and the, you know, the cycles of life, of nature, of the oceans. And it's just something really magical and mystical and wonderful. And many people will tell you that with periods comes a feeling, you know, a feeling of being not just in tune with nature, but it's when we realise we are nature. We are. Nature is inside of us. And it's really kind of marvellous, isn't it? And wonderful, beautiful. And we are all, you know, magical. We're all so wonderful. And this thing, you know, I would, you know, my bad days, you wouldn't have me saying this. I would be saying other things. But I'm really glad, you know, I am a woman. And when I stop having periods, I'll still be a woman. And that's one of these things that people sort of, they want to make these absolute things of, you know, women have uteruses and women have periods. And you're like, well, you know, some women don't because they've had to have them surgically removed. A lot of people struggle with that, you know, and a lot of people struggle with menopause, with the end of periods. I know that I went through a grieving period as well, like realising that I wasn't going to have kids. So that was, you know, kind of hard. But I'm looking forward to the next chapter. But I think, I was thinking about this and I thought, you know, there's this big question, what is it to be a woman? And I think, you know, we have to talk about periods and understand periods to really understand that, you know, or examine that. You know, we can't talk about these things without, it's like the sports thing and trans athletes. How can we talk about that if we don't talk about periods? We're not having the conversation if we're not talking about these things. So it's really important that we get to talk about it and share it. We don't have to shy away from the subject. We don't have to hide it, you know. And I was thinking before about the concept of what it is to be a spiritual warrior. And as a spiritual warrior, what we do is when we don't say something, we're not repressing, we're refraining. So with periods, it's really about being in a place where if we don't talk about them or we don't say anything, it's because we choose not to talk about them. Because we're refraining from talking about them in a healthy way. And not that we're not talking about them because we're repressing ourselves. Same thing when we've got any questions about what's going on in the world with gender. We need to be able to ask the questions. You know? When companies are bought and sold, we have a thing called due diligence, which is that before there's an agreement made, you get to check it all out. You know, you get to see what the other company's all about. You get to find out all the details. You get to understand things before you agree to something. And I don't like being pushed into something where I'm supposedly agreeing with something that I haven't had the chance to ask questions about. I don't like being dictated to. And maybe that's my nature, or maybe that's because as a woman, so often it feels like we're being dictated to. Because so many of our organisations are institutionally sexist. Education, medicine, sport, politics. Any more? Finance. Any more? We have so many institutionally sexist organisations that don't listen, that make assumptions, that are biased, that are prejudiced, that are discriminatory. And we're changing that. We are changing that, and that's great. But we change it because we demand to be heard, and we're not going to be silenced. And if you try and silence us, you'll have a hard job to do that. So, me talking about periods, I hope it helps. I really hope it helps. And like I say, some of this stuff is going to be so useful to me, to other people. I'm really grateful to these companies that are making such good products. And a lot of these companies are women-led, and that makes a big difference. Because, a lot of the companies that deal with periods, the pharmaceutical companies, the big brands, owned by men, run by men, advertising managed by men. And this is not disrespect, I'm not intending to be disrespectful to men, but the problem is it creates a very patronizing environment. Yeah. I went to see a doctor a little while ago because I'm going through the perimenopause, and it was a gynecological exam. It was a doctor of gynecology. It was a man. And he said to me this thing, and it stuck with me. And he said, we were talking about menopause, and he said to me, he said, well, when you go through the change, he said, basically, he said, you'll be a man. And I went, and I just looked at him, I was like, how do I respond to that statement? And he did a very poor exam. In fact, if you're listening or watching, go back and practice again and learn how to do it properly. But afterwards I thought about it, and I thought, you know what, this person should not be a gynecologist if he doesn't understand that there's more to being a woman than your hormones or your periods. Don't talk to me that way. Don't say that again, because you're wrong. In fact, I think he did try and correct himself, and he did say, what I mean is that your heart health, and you'll be at the same risk of heart health of somebody who's young, blah blah blah. And I thought about this, and I thought, well, that's not true. And how do I know it's not true? Well, despite the fact that medicine is institutionally sexist, and now there's a lot of work being done, because a lot of the medical departments the medicine is based on men's anatomy, okay? So that means that a woman going to be treated in that department is not getting the best treatment, because they're basically being treated like a man. You just feel like sometimes you think, hang on a second, why haven't we figured this out yet? Why haven't we figured this out yet? Seriously. Anyway, so we know a lot of that isn't true because women live longer. Despite the medical sexism. So if women live longer, even after menopause, where you could be living half your life after menopause, then how can we say these things? And sometimes what we do need to do is we just need to have a lot of common sense and just look out there. And when people are telling us stuff, we look around and go, well, that's not true because I can see it over there. That's not true because I see it in another culture. That's not true because honestly, I've just got a gut feeling that you're talking rubbish. Anyway. So, these questions about what is it to be a woman, And you know what? I was thinking about this and I thought, well, I'm 51 years old. I've had about 10 or so years without periods, about 40 years with periods. So maybe I need another 30 years without periods. And then I'll really be able to sum it up. Then I'll have had the double experience of 40 years with periods, 40 years without. And I'll be about 80. Maybe when I'm older, when I'm 80, I'll be able to really answer that question. But right now, there's just so many people jumping in trying to give us the answer to that. And as the great sages say, it is better to know and think that you do not know than to not know and think that you do know. So I think if nothing else, we should be asking the question and sitting with it, spending time with it. What does it mean to be a woman? Who is a woman? What is a woman? One thing I do know is that I am a woman. And I'm glad I know that. And I'm glad that I have that feeling, that I know who I am. But a lot of the spiritual journey and traveling and all this kind of stuff, a lot of it is about understanding who we are. And the way we often look at it is that we have an ego self and a true self. It doesn't just apply to things like gender or sexuality or vocation or anything else like that. It's about letting go of who we think we are and coming back to the truth, coming back to who we truly are. And that's a practice. All the work that I do is really about that. It's about healing what Marianne Williamson would call a fractured sense of self. And often we develop that fractured sense of self when we're younger, when we go through trauma. It can happen for a lot of reasons. A lot of people telling us who we are and who we should be and what we should be doing. And for me, a lot of it has been about trying to let go of all of that and really wake up to who I am and be truly, truly honest about who I am, what I do, who I want to be, where I want to be. And one thing I know is that the more truthful we are, the more easy it is to see when we're telling ourselves lies, how it feels when we're lying to ourselves. And I was thinking about, it's very disturbing, a lot of the things that we're hearing and seeing about the way people have been treated, the way people have not been safeguarded, the way people have not been protected. It's really hard. And it put me in mind, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, we talk about science and medicine and how we push the boundaries, and how sometimes scientists can do things not because it's the right thing, but because they're so excited about science, about developing things, about developing solutions, possibilities. And the person that came to mind was Richard Feynman, who, if you don't know, I believe he was the youngest scientist to work on the Manhattan Project, which developed the atom bomb during World War II. And so when they developed that, they were then later responsible for many, many deaths with the dropping of the atom bomb in Japan. And there were a lot of things that he said later in life that obviously reflected on that. And a lot of those people who were responsible for that science, later had a lot of misgivings about what they had created, where they took that Manhattan Project. And Richard Feynman said a lot of things. And he said, one thing he said was, the only person that you have to not fool is yourself. And you are the easiest person to fool. And he was really saying the same thing as we hear in some spiritual practice, which is that when we're looking for truth, if we don't want to be lied to, it's very easy to never be lied to, never be misled. But the way to do it is that you have to stop lying to yourself. Okay? Because when you can see your own lies, no one else can lie to you. But while you're lying to yourself, you'll be misled by everybody. And that's that thing of truth, of being able to look and discover what truth is. And when you can do that, when you can really, really perceive truth, say it's very, very hard for anybody else to mislead you, to lie to you. But the person you've got to figure out first is yourself. You've got to figure out your own lies first. That's the biggest challenge of all, isn't it? And I tell you something, I've never lied to myself as much as I have over the years with periods. I tell you, the number of times that I have been doing something, I could have been in a meeting, could have been on a plane, doing something, and I was experiencing the worst period pain in the world. So it felt like a donkey was kicking me in the guts. And I'd be acting like, what I'd say? I'm fine. I'm okay. I literally would just ignore that pain and get on with life. And that was really lying to myself, And all those years I would say, oh yes, just get on with it, and it didn't affect me, and all this kind of thing. And if I really told the truth, there's some hard going there. It's been some hard going the last couple of years. And I say this not to like worry you if you've got periods or anything like that, or you're worried about periods, but why wasn't I kinder to myself all those years? Why wasn't I kinder to myself? Just take the day off. Just go and lie down. Get a hot water bottle. Because why didn't I take the ibuprofen? I didn't take it. I would just muscle through it all the time. And that's what a lot of women do, a lot of people do. And it's so important that we just take a minute and go, you know what? If I'm hurting, y'all, I've got to take care of myself. I've got to look after myself. And talk to people. Get some advice. Talk to people, other people who are going through it. We might not all have the answers, but we might have some answers, some ideas. So if you do suffer from painful periods, talk to people, ask questions, talk to people, because it is okay to admit that you're having a tough time. It's okay to admit that you're scared. It's okay to admit that you're nervous about periods. It's okay to admit that you're worried about, doing PE or gym or fitness or sports, going swimming, all those things. We want to be going out, we want to be having fun and doing all the great things. And sometimes it is just hard, and sometimes we just can't do it. That's okay. It doesn't make you a lesser person. Having periods does not make you a lesser person. In fact, I think we're all wonderful. I think we're all great. But I do think we need to talk about periods a little bit more. And not be like so stoic, not think that we have to be stoic, that we have to act as if, it doesn't bother me and I'm all right and that kind of thing, because that's not honest. It's not truthful. Anyway, I hope this helps. Please let me know if you've got any questions. Drop stuff down in the comments and the questions and things like that. I am really looking forward to not having periods. It will be great. I'll be like this, yes, finish line. I've come to the finish line and there's no more periods and there's no more period. That'll be great. Can't wait. It'll be great. But I'm glad I discovered this stuff, and if I can hand that on to you, any of you who've still got quite a few periods to go for it. And use this stuff. And just remember that it is a beautiful, magical, wonderful thing that we go through. It's like life. It's just messy and painful sometimes, but it's life. That's what it is. It's just, oh, just fantastic, isn't it? Life is just so wonderful. And when I suffer from migraines, I always say this, a lot of times people think I'm a really like cheerful, happy, bubbly, bright person. And one of the reasons is that if there's a day and I don't have a migraine, I always say, this is a great day. And I think sometimes when you have periods, it gives you a sense of reality and of like knowing how great the days are when you don't have to think about this stuff and you don't have to worry about it. But I think also it's really important, for people in England or the States to remember what it's like for people in other countries. And I was thinking about this the other day in terms of menopause, and I thought, what about all the people in countries where they don't have any kind of HRT and they don't have that kind of medical care when people are going through the menopause? How do they cope? And I think it's really good that we talk more and more about period poverty. I love the Kung Fu nuns and what they do, their work on helping women who don't necessarily have like access to hygiene, and it's amazing, and sanitary care and all that kind of stuff. And I love how we're talking about it more and helping each other more. I think that's so fantastic and brilliant. And to be there for each other. I hope this helps. And take care and enjoy life. Bye.